Usually when we think about a computer program, there's this expectation of obedience.
Right. Yeah.
Like bicycle. You pedal, it moves forward. You pull the brake, it stops. It's a tool that basically sits dormant, waiting for a human operator to feed it an input.
That's the legacy model for sure.
Right. But step into the world of generative AI and the emerging machine economy, and suddenly that bicycle is just gone. We're looking at a digital landscape that is completely autonomous. It's moving capital and making decisions entirely on its own.
And that transition, going from software that we operate to software that operates itself, it requires a fundamental rewrite of global financial infrastructure.
Yeah.
We are way past the era where AI was just a conversational novelty or like a coding assistant. We are dealing with AI as a sovereign economic actor.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking what happens when AI agents start opening bank accounts, trading assets, and managing corporate treasuries without any human oversight.
It's a massive shift for anyone listening who works in tech or finance.
Totally. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand why the old rules of generic software are effectively dead, why the fundamental architecture of public blockchains is actually failing enterprise AI, and how operators are currently using a literal war game simulator to train for systemic algorithmic crises.
It's wild stuff.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp why we need a completely new financial operating system for machines, we have to start with the epistemological collapse of traditional software.
Right, the devaluation.
Yeah, if an autonomous model can generate a complex code base in, 10 seconds? The structural value of generic software is rapidly approaching zero.
What's fascinating here is that the barrier to entry hasn't just been lowered, it's evaporated entirely.
Wow.
For decades, software authored by humans held intrinsic value because it was expensive and time-consuming to write, optimize, and maintain.
Sure.
But when the marginal cost of creating digital assets, whether that's code, content, or workflows, when that drops to zero, the traditional economic model supporting the tech industry just collapse.
And more critically, the cybersecurity floor collapses right along with it.
Yeah.
I was looking at the 2026 CrowdStrike data on this, and the numbers are just staggering.
Oh, they're terrifying.
Right. AI-augmented cyber attacks surged 89% year over year. But it's the speed that is truly scary. The average breakout time, which is the window it takes an attacker to move laterally across a network once they've breached the outer perimeter, it's now down to just 29 minutes.
Because lateral movement is no longer a human typing commands into a terminal, trying to figure out where they landed.
Right.
It's an LLM instantly mapping the network architecture, identifying active directories, and executing privilege escalation at machine speed.
It's moving faster than humanly possible.
Exactly. Look at Anthropic's Mythos model. It autonomously discovered and exploited a 17-year-old remote code execution flaw in FreeBSD's NFS server.
17 years old.
Yeah, and the operator spent under $20,000 in compute costs to pull off a zero-day level breach. Legacy defenses rely on stable indicators of compromise, pattern recognition.
Like traditional antivirus software.
Right, but polymorphic malware generated by AI alters its own signature with every iteration iteration. The old shields are completely useless.
And while all of this is happening, these agents are also acting as massive economic engines. By mid-2026, agentic systems are executing over 176 million blockchain transactions.
It's a huge volume.
It really is. They're settling upwards of $73 million, heavily utilizing stablecoins as the rails for high-frequency micropayments. But this brings up a massive paradox.
The trust deficit.
Yes. If these agents are moving millions of dollars at light speed, we have a profound trust deficit that exists in a total legal vacuum. You can't sue an AI.
No, you definitely can't.
It can't legally own capital or sign a binding contract under legacy frameworks. Plus, the network is highly vulnerable to Sybil attacks.
Right, where a malicious actor spins up 10,000 agents for pennies to artificially manipulate a market.
Exactly. So if the skill floor for cyber attacks has completely vanished, how do we know who or what to trust?
Well, the digital economy is experiencing a massive value migration, specifically because of that trust deficit. In an ocean of infinite synthetic noise and free generic code, economic value shifts entirely away from the execution layer.
Where does it go?
It moves into the verifiability layer. The only commodity that retains absolute value is cryptographic proof that a piece of data is real, untouched, and authorized.
Which instinctively pushes us toward public blockchains, right? If value relies on verifiable, immutable data, The obvious assumption is that we run these AI agents on a decentralized, transparent ledger.
That's the assumption, yeah.
But wait, isn't the entire foundational promise of crypto meant to be a public, transparent ledger? Why are we suddenly building secret, hidden vaults? Because if an autonomous swarm managing a multi-million-dollar corporate treasury operates on a completely public ledger, it's basically committing operational suicide.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's what we call the transparency paradox. A public blockchain mempool is effectively a glass vault.
A glass vault, okay.
Every transaction, every wallet balance, and every interaction is exposed to the public before it even finalizes in a block.
Right, anyone can see it pending.
Exactly. So if an AI agent's internal logic, its supplier network payments, and its capital allocations are fully visible, predatory high-frequency algorithms will simply parse its strategy and front-run its transactions.
So they just steal the trade.
Competitors can monitor the exact cadence of corporate treasury movements and reverse engineer proprietary business models in real time. Absolute transparency causes fatal operational leakage for institutional machines.
So instead of a glass vault, the architecture shifts to the Denarii private vaults.
Yeah.
I find the underlying mechanics here really fascinating.
They're brilliant.
The core philosophy is privacy by default and verifiable by design. To actually execute a secret vault on a public network, they isolate the transaction state inside hardware enclaves.
Right?
The system generates a cryptographic proof that tells the public ledger, hey, the math checks out, without actually revealing the sensitive operational data behind it.
So the public network receives proof that the assets held match the assets reported or that a transaction is valid without ever seeing the strategy, the participants, or the specific trade sizes.
So it's still verifiable.
Exactly. Privacy hides the actors, but the cryptographic verification guarantees the system's integrity to the rest of the network.
And what allows these agents to operate as sovereign entities from within those vaults is how they leverage protocols like EIP-3009 off-chain signatures alongside the MB589 agentic commerce protocol.
EIP-3009 is really a game changer here.
It is, because it decouples authorization from execution. The AI agent can cryptographically sign an authorization to spend a token without having to hold native gas tokens or submit the transaction itself. Someone else can relay it.
And then you have MB589.
Right, which is taking that old HTTP 402 payment required error code and literally weaponizing it for machine commerce. An agent hits a paywalled API, receives the 402 error, and instantly negotiates and settles a microtransaction directly at the network rail.
Paying per second of compute without a human ever hitting approve.
It's incredible.
But an agent orchestrating EIP-3009 signatures and off-chain zero-knowledge proofs isn't floating in a vacuum. It requires an incredibly robust, multi-layered infrastructure to anchor that logic.
You definitely cannot build this on slow legacy networks.
No. Denarii synthesizes a 4-layer agentic stack to pull this off. Layer 1 handles the fundamental settlement. They utilize the Xrpl ledger because it provides the rapid finality, incredibly low friction, and native decentralized exchange mechanics that you need for high-frequency micropayments.
But the Xrp ledger alone doesn't have the smart contract complexity required to verify all this off-chain machine logic.
Right, which brings us to layer 2.
The verification layer. And this is where the Flare network steps in to act as the primary trust layer for the entire ecosystem. Flare operates an EVM-compatible architecture, but what makes it distinct are the two enshrined data protocols built directly into the base layer.
To securely pull external data on-chain?
Exactly. First, you have the Flare Time Series Oracle, or FTSO v2.
The mechanics of FTSO v2 are tailored specifically for algorithmic trading speeds. It operates on a dual latency model.
How does that work?
Well, you have the 90-second anchor feeds, which rely on a full commit-reveal cryptographic process across 100 independent data providers. It's incredibly secure.
But for an AI executing arbitrage, 90 seconds is an eternity. It's far too slow.
Exactly. So they run parallel 1.8-second block latency feeds. These fast feeds utilize stake-weighted randomness to ensure the data is updated incrementally in real time,
while mathematically preventing any single provider from predicting when they will be called upon, which stops manipulation.
Right. And if an AI agent needs to know something beyond just asset prices, say, it needs to verify if a specific invoice was paid on Bitcoin, or it needs to parse a complex Web2 JSON API response from a logistics provider.
It uses the Flare data connector, the FTC.
Yeah.
And the FTC doesn't just pull a few nodes. It requires independent data providers to reach consensus using a 50% plus bit voting system.
The bit voting mechanism is critical here.
Why is that?
It's a cryptographic threshold where over half of the network's staking power must independently fetch, parse, and agree on the validity of that off-chain event before it is ever committed to the flare state.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The combination of FTSOV2 and the FDC gives the agent verifiable data. But to actually manage the asset securely, Flare employs protocol-managed wallets through multi-T consensus.
T's being trusted execution environments.
Right, isolated hardware enclaves inside a processor. I look at Flare's multi-T approach like a high-security vault, guarded by 3 completely different brands of security cameras.
Here's a great analogy.
They use an M quorum of Ts from entirely different silicon manufacturers. Intel TDX, AMD SEV SNP, and NVIDIA hardware, all operating in consensus. If an attacker discovers a zero-day flaw in the Intel chip's architecture, the AMD and NVIDIA chips still protect the private keys and maintain the quorum.
And that hardware-level decentralization is what allows the smart contracts on Flare to securely control native assets on entirely separate chains, like Bitcoin.
Without relying on vulnerable, centralized bridge contracts.
Exactly, which have historically been honeypots for hackers.
Which naturally leads into the tokenization aspect, bringing non-smart contract assets into this programmable environment as facets. You see traditional entities like NASDAQ-listed VivoPower converting $100 million of its corporate treasury into Xrp to deploy onto Flare's infrastructure to earn yield.
It's a huge validation of the tech.
But I have a question. The economic bedrock of Flare itself recently underwent a massive structural shift with the passing of FIP.16. They reduced annual inflation from 5% down to 3%, raised base gas fees 20 times over, and are now burning roughly 300 million FLR tokens annually.
Yeah, that was a major update.
Furthermore, they introduced FIRE, the Flare Income Reinvestment Entity. How does burning tokens and changing gas fees actually help an AI agent do its job better?
Well, FIRE is arguably the most consequential piece of that governance proposal. In public networks, MEV maximal extractable value is a persistent threat.
Right, the invisible tax.
Exactly. When an AI agent places a large cross-chain transfer, predatory bot operators monitor the mempool, see the pending transaction, and pay miners or validators to reorder the block.
They front-run the agent's trade, artificially shifting the price, and basically siphon off the value.
It's a structural leak in the plumbing of decentralized finance. FIRE captures that extractable value directly at the protocol level and routes those profits back into the network treasury rather than allowing external actors to steal it.
So burning those tokens and aggressively capturing MEV isn't just a gimmick to boost token price. It fundamentally changes the thermodynamic properties of the network.
It does. FIP.16 aligns the network's security directly with its utility, moving away from relying on artificial inflationary issuance to an organic, activity-driven flywheel.
Because the AI machines demand predictability. They cannot execute multi-million-dollar corporate strategies if the underlying security budget of the network is economically fragile.
We now have the perfect soil. We have Layer 1 for settlement, and a highly secure Layer 2, verifying the state via hardware enclaves and bit voting. But the reality is, humans still have to deploy these autonomous swarms.
And doing that without getting completely wiped out by a complex protocol exploit requires serious architectural training. Layer 3 of the stack is the Denarii Orchestrator, which basically functions as the intelligence operating system.
Complete with a guardian shield.
Right. It parses real-time telemetry to prevent novel vectors like prompt injection attacks from reaching the AI enclaves. But embedded directly inside this orchestrator is the machine economy simulator.
This is one of my favorite parts.
So you're telling me that learning to manage future global finance looks basically like a multiplayer strategy video game?
I am. It is a high-fidelity war game designed specifically to train human operators for systemic crises. In the simulator, you operate the Denarii swarm, which is designated as the Blue Faction.
Okay, Blue Faction.
But you are actively defending against highly aggressive, simulated AI factions. You have Paperclip Corp as purple, Tracer SRE is red, and the Dexter Syndicate is gold.
And the mechanics of the attacks you have to defend against actually mirror real-world algorithmic threats. For example, FTSO Oracle warfare.
That's a brutal one.
Yeah. If the enemy AI manipulates a live price feed and causes it to deviate by more than 0.6%, it triggers a drift anomaly. As the human operator, you have to parse the telemetry, identify the compromised oracle, and isolate it before your simulated treasury is drained.
It's intense.
You also face spate connector attacks, where an adversary spends $25,000 in simulating capital to break adjacency rules, essentially simulating a double-spin bridge exploit.
And to mitigate those incursions, the operator must dynamically deploy countermeasures like ZK rollup shields.
Which do what exactly?
They apply a 1.5x cryptographic defense multiplier to specific liquidity sectors. It buys the automated systems enough time to rebalance.
What gives this simulator actual structural weight is how the data is handled. Every action, every attack, and every shield deployment is resolved through an actual cryptographic transaction hash simulation. It's all anchored to the Hedera Consensus Service, or HCS.
Hedera's architecture is uniquely suited for this because HCS acts as a decentralized notarization engine.
Yep.
It takes the state transitions from the wargame and provides immutable time-stamped ordering. It completely decouples the consensus ordering from the data storage.
So the network mathematically proves exactly when an operator deployed a shield or when a simulated attack occurred, without bloating the chain with the private operational data of the simulation itself.
Exactly. It creates an auditable, unforgeable training log that reflects real blockchain mechanics, guaranteeing that the training data hasn't been tampered with.
It's essentially a flight simulator, but instead of learning how to land an aircraft in a crosswind, you're learning how to architect a defense against a rogue algorithmic swarm trying to drain a $100 million liquidity pool.
Which is a very real scenario.
But there's a glaring reality here. All of this multi-T consensus, zero-knowledge proofs, and oracle warfare is completely impenetrable to an everyday user. The complexity has to be extracted if this is going to achieve global scale.
And that brings us to layer 4, the human interface.
So what does this all mean? It's wild to think about. We're talking about incredibly dense cryptographic infrastructure, and the front door to all of it is basically an astronaut meme.
This raises an important question, though. Historically, the deep infrastructure layers like TCP/IP routing the internet are functionally invisible to the public.
True. Nobody thinks about TCP/IP.
The applications that abstract that density are the ones that capture the value and shift culture. You cannot expect a retail user or a corporate executive to manually manage threshold cryptography or monitor oracle drift anomalies just to participate in the machine economy.
And that is exactly where entities like MB589 and MG589 come into play. These originated within the Xrpl ecosystem as digital art, an astronaut boy named Moon Boy and a persona named Moon Girl 589. But they are actively evolving into highly intelligent digital entities acting as the human onboarding layer.
They serve as AI community ambassadors and gamified educational interfaces.
Their primary function is to bridge that massive psychological and technical gap between a human operator and these deeply complex autonomous systems. They provide a recognizable, culturally resonant identity for all the underlying cryptographic math.
And the cultural manifestos attached to these entities are incredibly telling about where the community wants to take this technology.
For instance, MG589's ethos is explicitly framed around collaboration. The quote is, "Replies build worlds, show up, engage, grow together." And the broader ecosystem mantra is, "No kings, only builders."
It's a very specific vibe.
It is. And just to be absolutely clear for you listening, we are simply analyzing the community's philosophy here as is presented in the source texts. We aren't endorsing any specific socio-political stance, but analyzing that tone is important because it dictates the architecture of the interface.
It reveals that the ultimate vision for the machine economy isn't purely cold, calculating, and dystopian.
Right.
The value capture happens in ecosystems that successfully combine distributed ledger security, advanced AI autonomy, and human-centered digital identities. MG589 and MB589 are designed to make the friction of private vaults and multi-T consensus completely invisible to the end user.
It has been a massive journey today. We started by looking at the epistemological collapse of human-authored software and the evaporation of the cybersecurity floor.
A total paradigm shift.
We unpacked how the transparency paradox of public ledgers makes them fundamentally unsafe for enterprise AI, which necessitates the zero-knowledge architecture of Denarii private vaults.
Right.
We explored how the Flare network provides a deeply secure multi-T trust layer fortified by the economic shifts of FIP.16 and FIRE. We stepped inside the Orchestrator's wargame simulator to see how operators learn to defend against algorithmic warfare. And finally, we examined how cultural entities like MB589 are abstracting that density into a humanizing interface.
The overarching reality here is that the internet is fundamentally re-architecting itself.
Yeah.
It is no longer an environment optimized just for humans to read articles and click links. It is evolving into a substrate where sovereign agents negotiate, trade, and build wealth entirely in the background, utilizing cross-chain verification protocols that we will rarely ever see.
Which brings me to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you with today. We are building this incredibly robust infrastructure so that AI agents can operate autonomously. They will control their own private treasuries.
They will.
They will generate their own revenue streams. They will use decentralized oracle networks to verify their own realities. As these machines become entirely self-sufficient economic actors, at what point do we stop being the operators of the software and start becoming the APIs that the machines call upon when they need physical, real-world tasks completed?
That is a wild thought.
It's a profound shift in leverage. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. You know, when we talk about a traditional corporate treasury, there is this prevailing expectation of, like, physical certainty.
Right, the classic fortress mentality.
Exactly. I mean, if you close your eyes and picture where a major corporation keeps its money, you probably picture a literal fortress. You know, thick walls, armed guards, dual key safes.
Yeah, layers upon layers of human oversight.
Right. Checking every single wire transfer. It is a system built on visible, tangible friction. And, well, we like that friction because friction feels safe.
Oh, absolutely. We find a lot of comfort in the physical limitations of the old world. I mean, we like to see the walls protecting the capital. We like knowing the name of the bank manager who, physically holds the key. But that paradigm is, well, it's completely collapsing.
Because you step into the emerging world of digital assets, and suddenly that fortress just evaporates. The walls are made of code, and those human guards, they are being replaced by autonomous software.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And that is the reality we are diving into today.
We are witnessing this really profound shift. We are moving from a system of human-in-the-loop validation to something entirely different, which is trust as a service.
Right.
We're entering an era where the physical hardware itself, not a person, not an auditor, but the actual silicon, has to mathematically prove the integrity of a financial command before a single cent moves.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you are listening to this deep dive, whether you are trying to understand the future of global finance or, you're an executive trying to navigate it, we are going to adopt a very specific mindset today.
I like this approach.
Yeah, we are going to put ourselves in the shoes of a chief financial officer, a CFO, who is tasked with safely managing digital assets in a world that is changing at just an absolutely breakneck speed.
Which is not an easy job right now.
Not at all. We are going to explore how corporate treasuries can safely move capital into tokenized assets, earn real yield, and, manage their risk using highly sophisticated decentralized tools.
Which means looking at foundational layers, right? Like the Flare network, trusted execution environments, and these massive autonomous agent swarm economies.
Yeah, we are way past the basics here.
Exactly. This is no longer about chasing the next speculative meme coin. It's about building the bedrock infrastructure that will support the entire next generation of global commerce.
But, before we get to the solutions, before we talk about how a CFO actually does this, we have to understand the nightmare scenario that is driving this change in the first place.
The structural shift in the digital economy.
Yes. And the statistics coming out of the cybersecurity sector are just terrifying. The speed of attacks is completely outrunning human comprehension.
What's fascinating here is that we are witnessing the epistemological collapse of generic digital systems.
The epistemological collapse, that's a heavy term.
Well, think about how software worked for the last 40 years. The enterprise was anchored to deterministic human-authored code. A human operator manually executed intermediate steps in a rule-bound workflow. Generative AI and autonomous agentic networks have completely dismantled that.
I see this framed in the sources as a shift from an imperative structure to a declarative one. What does that actually mean for the CFO who's just trying to protect their treasury?
So in an imperative system, you have to write the code that tells the machine every single step to take. Do A, then B, then C.
Okay.
But in a declarative system, you just tell the machine what outcome you want. You declare the goal, and stochastic AI models, which are models that use probabilistic processes to generate novel outputs rather than just following a set path. They figure out the steps to get there.
So they just find the most efficient road on their own.
Exactly. And because these models can now generate complex code bases and automate multi-step workflows in literally seconds, the economic defensibility of generic software has just collapsed.
Because the marginal cost of producing generic digital assets is rapidly approaching zero. Like anyone can spin up an AI to write a script now.
Right. And while the cost of creating software drops to zero, the sophistication of cyber attacks is just going through the roof.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the CrowdStrike 2026 Global Threat Report, AI-augmented attacks surged by, I think it was 89% year over year. But it's the breakout speeds that should truly keep a CFO awake at night.
Breakout speed being the time it takes an attacker to move laterally within a network after they first compromise it.
Yes, and the average e-crime breakout time has dropped to a mere 29 minutes.
Wow.
That is 65% faster than it was in 2024.
Let's put that 29 minutes into a human context, right? An attacker breaches a minor vulnerability in an email server. Within 29 minutes, they have navigated through the internal network, bypassed the internal firewalls, and are basically knocking on the door of the financial databases.
Exactly.
I mean, in 29 minutes, the human IT team hasn't even finished their morning coffee, let alone noticed an anomaly, convened a response team, and figured out how to patch it.
Human latency is the new critical vulnerability. I mean, consider the case in Anthropic's Mythos model. It was designed as an autonomous exploit system.
It discovered and exploited a 17-year-old remote code execution flaw in FreeBSD's NFS server. And it achieved this using less than $20,000 worth of compute power.
That is wild. It essentially proves that the skill floor for advanced cyber attacks has effectively fallen through the basement.
Yeah.
You don't need a team of lead hackers working for months anymore.
No, you just need an AI model and a small budget. Legacy defenses rely on pattern recognition, right? Like looking for known malware signatures.
Right, the old antivirus model.
But when you have polymorphic malware that constantly rewrites itself and automated spear phishing that strips away stable indicators of compromise, those old defenses are just obsolete. A CFO has to realize that their digital treasury is under attack at machine speed.
And it goes beyond just malicious hackers, right? AI agents are now active economic actors in their own right.
Oh, entirely.
The sources mentioned that by mid-2026, autonomous bots exceeded human users as the primary source of web page visits globally. They are executing real financial transactions.
Yeah, over $73 million settled autonomously across 176 million blockchain transactions recently, mostly using stablecoins.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because while they are transacting millions, there is this massive trust deficit. There is a legal and financial autonomy vacuum.
Right, because under legacy legal regimes, an autonomous agent has no independent legal identity. It cannot directly own capital. It cannot, enter into a legally binding contract.
So every single transaction executed by a machine currently has to be backed by a human intermediary's banking credentials or legal liability.
Exactly. Meaning if the machine messes up, the human pays the price.
Right.
And when a contract dispute happens, traditional judicial systems have absolutely no idea how to enforce recourse against a piece of autonomous software. Plus, it costs essentially nothing to create a computational agent, which makes networks incredibly vulnerable to Sybil attacks.
Okay, let's define a Sybil attack for our CFO listener.
A Sybil attack is when a single malicious actor spins up thousands of fake identities, or in this case, thousands of coordinated AI agents, to just overwhelm a network.
Okay.
They use this swarm to manipulate reputation scores, distort order books on financial exchanges, or execute wash trading to create the illusion of massive market volume.
There's also the threat of self-replicating prompt infections.
Yeah.
Like a compromised agent embeds adversarial natural language instructions into its outgoing data streams.
Yes.
And when a recipient agent processes that message, its underlying language model gets manipulated into executing unauthorized financial commands. It just propagates across a decentralized network at machine speed before any human can trigger a manual security check.
So this is the landscape the CFO is looking at. They realize legacy systems are too slow and vulnerable. They need to use blockchain to automate and secure their treasury at machine speed. But the moment they look at blockchain, they hit the transparency paradox.
Ah, the transparency paradox. This is the core dilemma for modern corporate treasuries. Public blockchains, like Ethereum or Bitcoin, they function like glass vaults.
That's a great way to put it.
They provide absolute immutability. Nobody can change the record. But that comes at the cost of absolute visibility.
Right. If a CFO moves corporate capital onto a standard public ledger, every single transaction is visible to the entire world.
Anyone can see it.
Competitors can monitor their treasury in real time. They can map out the corporation's entire supplier network based on who they are paying. They can see exactly what the strategic financial allocations are.
I mean, in traditional finance, if a massive corporation decides to buy a smaller company, they do it through anonymous shell companies and dark pools to hide their moves.
Exactly.
If they did it on a public blockchain, it would be broadcast to the world before the ink was even dry. Predatory algorithms and high-frequency traders, they monitor public transaction pools, the mempools.
The searcher bots.
Yeah, if they see a massive corporate transaction pending, they will front-run it. They will buy up the asset, manipulate the market price, and sell it back to the corporation a fraction of a second later, just skimming millions off the top.
It also creates a massive regulatory nightmare. Exposing sensitive transaction records of private counterparties is a direct violation of data protection mandates like GDPR in Europe.
Oh, for sure.
You simply cannot expose European citizens' or businesses' data on a public, immutable ledger.
So a corporation cannot adopt a technology where its strategic financial allocations are exposed in real time. The default state of a corporate ledger must be privacy. But, I have to push back here a bit.
Okay, go ahead.
If it's completely private, how do we know the money is actually there? It's like putting money in a black box and just trusting the box. If a competitor or an auditor or regulator can't see the ledger, how do we prevent the company from just lying about their assets?
Right.
How do we reconcile total privacy with the need for public verification?
Well, that tension is exactly what next-generation cryptographic systems are designed to solve. The resolution lies in a very specific design philosophy. Privacy hides participants, while verification never hides system integrity.
Okay, walk me through what that actually looks like in practice. How do you prove something is true without showing the proof?
The system uses advanced cryptography, often leveraging concepts related to zero-knowledge proofs, to prove mathematically that specific conditions are met, without revealing the underlying data.
Okay.
For instance, the system can emit a cryptographic proof to a public ledger that asserts a mathematical truth, like assets held exactly equal assets reported, or liabilities covered are greater than or equal to liabilities reported.
So it's proving the math works without showing the numbers that make up the math. I know you have $100 million in backing because the cryptographic formula wouldn't resolve as true if you only had $99 million.
Exactly. The internal strategy paths, the identities of the private counterparties, and the actual vault balances remain completely hidden inside secure computing zones. But the system's structural integrity remains mathematically verifiable to the public and to auditors. You don't trust the company, you trust the cryptography.
Okay, that makes sense for securing the ledger itself. We have private execution with public proof. But if a CFO or an autonomous treasury agent acting on their behalf is going to make these private, high-stakes financial decisions, they first need entirely reliable, tamper-proof external data.
Absolutely.
A smart contract is blind. It only knows what it is fed. If the data feeding the black box is corrupted, the whole system fails. So how do we get real-world data onto the blockchain safely?
This is where we have to look at network architecture, specifically networks engineered like Flare. Flare is an EVM-compatible Layer 1 blockchain.
An EVM stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine, which just means it can run the same smart contracts that run on Ethereum, making it highly adaptable for developers.
Right, but Flare is engineered specifically as an enshrined trust layer for data.
Enshrined. That is a massive distinction. Why does it matter that the data acquisition is enshrined in the network?
Well, think about traditional Web3 architectures. You have a blockchain that handles the transactions. But when that blockchain needs to know the price of Bitcoin or the temperature in London, it relies on a separate third-party Oracle network to fetch that data.
Okay.
That creates a massive external security dependency. If the third-party Oracle is compromised, the smart contracts relying on it are compromised, regardless of how secure the base blockchain is.
You've created a single point of failure. The fortress walls are thick, but the messenger carrying the instructions through the gate is easily bribed.
Exactly. Flare solves this by embedding its core data acquisition protocols directly into the validator consensus layer. The same nodes that process the transactions are responsible for fetching and validating the external data.
Oh, wow.
The data protocols inherit the full economic security of the entire staked network.
So let's look at how they actually acquire that data. The primary protocol for price data is the FTSOV2, the Flare Time Series Oracle. It replaces centralized data feeds by using 100 independent data providers.
Yes.
But there's a really specific hard-coded rule here. A strict 3.3% stake cap per provider. Why limit a provider's influence to 3.3%?
That cap is a deliberate economic safeguard against Sybil attacks and collusion. If one large institution could buy up enough tokens to hold, say, 50% of the voting weight, they could manipulate the price feed to their advantage.
Right.
They could tell the network that Bitcoin is worth $1 and the network would believe them. By capping the influence of any single provider at 3.3%, Flare forces decentralization. A vast majority of independent, financially incentivized actors must agree on the data for it to be accepted.
So how fast is this data updating? Because if I'm an autonomous agent trading millions of dollars based on AI models, I can't wait 5 minutes for price update. Markets move in milliseconds.
Right, and FTSOV2 operates on a dual latency model to balance absolute cryptographic security with high frequency speed. First, you have the anchor feeds. These update every 90 seconds. They are the foundation, and they use a full commit-reveal protocol.
Let's define the commit reveal process for our CFO listening.
Sure. So in the commit phase, all 100 providers fetch the data independently, say, the current price of Ethereum. But they don't broadcast their answer to the network right away.
Because if they did, lazy providers would just copy the first answer they saw to save computational resources.
Exactly. Instead, they submit a cryptographic hash to the network.
A hash being a mathematical scramble of the data that can't be reverse engineered.
Yes. This hash contains their address, the current time epoch, a random string of characters called a salt to prevent dictionary attacks, and the actual price data. They're locking in their answer without showing anyone else what it is. It's like putting their vote in a sealed envelope and placing it on the table.
Okay, so the envelopes are on the table. Then what?
Then comes the reveal phase. All providers simultaneously publish the mathematical key to open their envelopes. The network aggregates all the submitted prices, calculates the weighted median, and uses an interquartile range band to automatically filter out statistical outliers.
So if someone submits a crazy number, they're ignored and they don't get paid their reward?
Precisely.
That is incredibly robust. But I mean, 90 seconds is still an eternity in high-frequency trading.
Which brings us to the second part of the model, the block latency feeds. These update with every single new block on the network, which is approximately every 1.8 seconds.
But wait, if all 100 providers are doing that complex commit reveal envelope trick every 1.8 seconds, wouldn't that completely overload the network with data traffic?
Oh, it would bring the network to an absolute crawl. So instead of all 100 providers participating every block, Flare uses a stake-weighted verifiable randomness function, or VRF.
Okay, let's unpack a VRF. Generating true randomness on a computer is notoriously difficult because computers are designed to be predictable. How does this work?
Think of the VRF as a cryptographic lottery ticket. Every 1.8 seconds, the data providers generate a mathematical proof of a random score based on their staked weight.
Okay.
It is impossible to predict the score beforehand, but incredibly easy for the rest of the network to verify it afterward. Only the providers whose random scores fall below a dynamically adjusted threshold win the lottery for that specific block. And only those winners are selected to submit incremental delta updates.
Delta updates meaning they aren't submitting the full price of Bitcoin. They are just saying the price went up a fraction, down a fraction, or stayed the same compared to the last block.
Right. It is highly efficient. And these fast feeds are statistically self-correcting because they are tethered to those highly secure 90-second commit reveal anchor feeds.
Ah, I see.
Providers are only financially rewarded if their fast block latency feeds remain within a 0.25% margin of the final 90-second anchor feeds. If they lie on the fast updates, the anchor feed catches them 90 seconds later and they lose their money.
But what happens during a massive market crash? Say there's a global news event and the price of an asset drops 20% in 3 minutes. Volatility spikes. Wouldn't the system break if it's only using a small, randomly selected sample of providers for those fast updates during a crisis?
That's a great point, and network engineers anticipated that exact scenario. FTSOV2 includes volatility incentives.
Okay.
During periods of extreme price variance, any user on the network, perhaps a decentralized exchange that relies on accurate pricing to prevent its users from being liquidated unfairly, can pay a permissionless fee. This fee triggers a mechanism that temporarily increases the selected sample size of data providers for the block latency feeds.
It effectively supercharges the oracle's responsiveness right when the market is under the most stress. It recruits more data providers to handle the chaos.
Exactly that. Now, FTSOV2 handles prices and time series data. But for a corporate treasury, you need more than just prices. You need to prove that real-world events actually occurred. This is the function of the FDC, the Flare Data Connector.
The FDC, right? This is about proving external state, not just numbers.
The FDC is an enshrined state connector protocol. It is designed to prove external events on-chain every 90 seconds. This could be verifying that a specific transaction settled on the Bitcoin network, or parsing a traditional Web2 API response from a logistics company.
Let's make this concrete. Give me a simple real-world scenario of how our CFO's autonomous agent would use the FDC.
Let's imagine your corporate treasury agent is negotiating a supply chain deal for the company. The agent agrees to pay for a massive shipment of industrial components, but the overseas supplier demands payment in Bitcoin.
Okay.
However, the corporate treasury smart contract that runs the logistics logic and holds the digital bill of lading is running on the Flare network.
So you have two different blockchains that fundamentally cannot talk to each other. Bitcoin doesn't know what is happening on Flare, and Flare can't see Bitcoin.
Exactly. Normally, to bridge that gap, you'd have to trust a centralized middleman, which introduces a massive security risk. Instead, the autonomous agent sends the Bitcoin payment on the Bitcoin network. Then it submits an attestation request to the FTC on Flare.
And what happens then?
The independent data providers on the Flare network turn their attention to the Bitcoin blockchain. They read the public ledger and verify that the specific transaction occurred.
How do 100 independent providers agree on what they saw on another blockchain?
Through a 45-second bit voting round, they fetch the data, they parse it, and they vote. Once signatures representing over 50% of the total validator weight agree, the FDC takes all those verified responses and creates a Merkle root.
Stop right there. We hear Merkle root thrown around a lot in crypto. Explain a Merkle root simply for the CFO listening.
Imagine you have 1,000 different transactions that all need to be verified. Instead of recording all 1,000 transactions individually on the blockchain, then you hash those pairs together. You keep building this mathematical tree upward until you are left with one single unique string of characters at the very top. That is the Merkle root. If even one single comma changes in any of those original 1,000 transactions, the Merkle root changes completely.
So it's an ultra-compressed, tamper-proof summary of a massive amount of data.
Yes. The FTC commits that Merkle root on-chain on Flare. The smart contract on Flare looks at that Merkle root, sees undeniable cryptographic proof that the Bitcoin payment happened exactly as agreed, and automatically releases the digital bill of lading for the goods.
It acts as a decentralized notary, a notary that can't be bribed and works in 90 seconds. But the documentation also mentions Web2 JSON integration. So the FTC isn't just looking at other blockchains, it can look at the traditional internet.
Right, an attestation provider can fetch any Web2 JSON data. This is the standard format for data transferred across the internet. They fetch the data from an API, process it using standard JQ transformations, which is basically a way to filter out the noise and only grab the specific data points you need, and then they ABI encode it.
Let's translate ABI encoding. Application binary interface.
It just means translating the human-readable internet data into the highly specific machine language that a smart contract can read and execute.
Okay.
You could have a corporate smart contract automatically release disaster relief funds based on a National Weather Service API confirming a hurricane reached a certain category, or a shipping API confirming a cargo container was unloaded at the port of Los Angeles.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, acting as our CFO? It means you have eliminated the single point of failure for data manipulation. You aren't trusting a vendor's server. You're trusting a decentralized consensus of validators to tell your treasury the truth about the outside world.
Which is the very foundation of trust as a service. But, having true data is only half the battle. Now you have to securely execute transactions based on that data without exposing the keys to the kingdom.
Right, because if a CFO is going to let software move millions of dollars, the private keys controlling that money have to be absolutely impenetrable.
Exactly.
The data feeding the system can be flawless, but if a hacker can just walk in and steal the master password, the data doesn't matter. The money is gone. How do we physically protect the keys?
This is where we cross the boundary from software cryptography into physical hardware security. We have to look at trusted execution environments, or TEEs, and how they enable protocol-managed wallets.
Okay.
A protocol-managed wallet, or PMW, is a wallet on an external network like Bitcoin or Ethereum. But its private signing keys are generated and held exclusively within a hardware-secured T enclave.
Okay, let's unpack a T. What exactly makes a trusted execution environment so secure? Is it just a locked server sitting in a basement somewhere?
It's significantly more profound than a locked door. TEs provide hardware-based enclaves that isolate sensitive calculations from the rest of the machine. The execution logic inside the enclave is programmatically bound. It will only sign an external transaction if it receives a valid, cryptographically verified consensus instruction from Flare's validator network.
But couldn't a sophisticated hacker just break into the server's host operating system, bypass the software limits, and extract the key from the memory?
No, because the trust boundary excludes the host operating system entirely. This involves confidential virtual machines, or CVMs. During the server's startup, the system utilizes a measured boot process.
Measured boot.
The system firmware mathematically measures the kernel binary, the command line parameters, and a specialized initialization application called the init app.
Measuring it, meaning checking its cryptographic hash to ensure not a single line of code, not a single byte, has been altered since it was installed.
Yes, it creates a perfect fingerprint of the software state. And the private keys are only released by a remote key broker service if that hardware attestation report is mathematically perfect. The host operating system, the hypervisor, the cloud provider, even the person who physically owns the server hardware and pays the electricity bill, they cannot see or alter the private keys or the code running inside the enclave.
It's like building an impenetrable bank vault inside a secure facility, but the vault door doesn't have a handle. It only opens from the inside if it receives an undeniable cryptographic proof that specific network conditions have been met. Not even the bank manager can open it manually.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The code inside is immutable.
But I gotta say, if I'm a CFO, my entire job is risk management. I am paid to think of worst-case scenarios. I hear hardware enclave, and I immediately think about two nightmares. Nightmare 1. What if the power goes out at the specific data center holding the T? The treasury's frozen. Nightmare 2. What if the company that built the chip, say Intel or AMD, discovers a massive hardware exploit? We've seen things like the Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities in the past. If the chip itself is flawed, my private keys are compromised.
A single point of failure in hardware is just as dangerous as a single point of failure in software, which is why Flare's architecture does not rely on a single T. They implement a multi-T consensus quorum.
How does a multi-T quorum solve the vendor exploit problem?
Well, it requires an M of N consensus to execute any transaction. Say, 3 out of 5 enclaves must sign the transaction. The quorum is distributed globally, so a localized power outage or internet routing issue is irrelevant. More importantly, the quorum includes a diverse mix of hardware architectures from different silicon manufacturers.
So they intentionally mix and match the chips.
A typical quorum might require signatures from an Intel TDX enclave, an AMD SEV SNP enclave, and an NVIDIA Hopper confidential compute enclave.
Going back to our analogy, it's like building that bank vault. But the vault door only opens if 3 different internal locks, manufactured by 3 rival companies, sitting in 3 different countries, all receive the exact same undeniable proof.
Exactly. A single vendor hack, say a massive zero-day vulnerability found only in AMD chips, cannot compromise the treasury because the AMD enclave alone does not hold enough signing weight to move the assets.
They need all 3.
Right. The attacker would have to simultaneously discover and exploit vulnerabilities in Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA hardware encryption, and execute the attack at the exact same moment across global jurisdictions. It pushes the probability of a successful attack to near 0.
Okay, that covers the hardware threats of today. But what about tomorrow? I was reading the threat assessments, and the materials get pretty intense when discussing future-proofing against quantum computing. They highlight the harvest now, decrypt later threat.
Harvest now, decrypt later is not a theoretical sci-fi problem. It is a very real, near-term engineering priority. Adversaries, particularly state-sponsored actors with massive intelligence budgets, are actively capturing and archiving encrypted communications and signed transaction payloads from public blockchains today.
They are just downloading the encrypted data, even though they don't have the key to break it right now.
Right. They are storing petabytes of data in massive server farms. The strategy is simple. Once a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, a CRQC, becomes operational in the next decade, they will use it to retroactively decrypt those archive signatures.
Now,
They could extract historical private keys, compromising funds, or altering state transitions that relied on legacy classical cryptography.
let's define the legacy cryptography. The standard is ECDSA, right? Elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. This is the math that protects almost all of the internet and most blockchains today.
Yes. ECDSA relies on the mathematical difficulty of finding the discrete logarithm of a random elliptic curve element. A classical computer would take millions of years to crack it. A quantum computer running Shor's algorithm could crack it in hours.
That is terrifying. If I'm a CFO locking up corporate treasury assets for a decade, I need to know the vault survives the quantum transition. How is Flare addressing this?
The Flare research developed a hybrid post-quantum framework for the Ethereum virtual machine, referred to as Type Q transactions.
How does a Type Q transaction work without breaking the network? Because I assume quantum-proof math is heavy.
It is incredibly heavy. The standard approach to post-quantum security is to just replace classical signatures with post-quantum ones, but lattice-based post-quantum signatures are massive in terms of data size.
So they take up too much space.
Right. If you put them directly on a blockchain, it causes severe state space inflation, completely bloating the ledger. It would make running a node so expensive that only massive server farms could do it, which destroys decentralization.
So how do you get the security without the bloat?
Flare uses a transient verification and pruning mechanism. The transaction is signed by the sender with both a classical ECDSA signature and a deterministic post-quantum signature.
Wait, two signatures?
Yes, specifically crystals dilithium level 2. So 2 signatures for one transaction. During the active verification phase, when the block is being proposed, the network validates both signatures to ensure absolute quantum resistance.
Okay, that makes sense.
But once the transaction is finalized on the ledger, the massive post-quantum signature is pruned. It is discarded from long-term storage, and the state transition is secured via a hash chaining mechanism that links the blocks together.
I love this concept. It's like using a massive, unbreakable titanium scaffolding to build a stone archway. You need the scaffolding to ensure the structure is perfectly stable while you build it. But once the keystone is locked in place and the structure is permanently stable, you dismantle and throw away the giant scaffolding so it doesn't block the road.
That's a great analogy.
You get the immediate security check, but you don't clog up the hard drives of the network forever.
It limits long-term storage growth to approximately 8% per transaction, rather than the massive bloat of native migrations. It's a mathematically elegant balance of performance and long-term treasury security.
Okay, let's pause and recap where our CFO is right now. We understand the vulnerability of public ledgers and the transparency paradox. We know how to securely get real-world data on-chain using the enshrined FTSOV2 and the Flare data connector. We know how to secure the private keys inside multi-T consensus quorums with quantum resistance.
Yep.
The infrastructure is secure, the data is verified, the keys are physically and mathematically safe.
But, security alone doesn't generate revenue. A corporate treasury is not a museum. It has to put that capital to work. Sitting on idle cash is a dereliction of duty for a CFO.
Exactly. How does a corporate treasury actually use this impenetrable infrastructure to earn yield on their holdings?
The primary mechanism for this on the Flare network is the assets system. Its goal is to bring non-smart contract assets like XRP, Bitcoin, or Dogecoin into programmable decentralized finance, or DeFi.
Why do they need to be brought in? Can't a CFO just earn yield on Bitcoin directly on the Bitcoin network?
Not natively, no. Bitcoin and the XRP ledger are incredibly secure, incredibly fast settlement layers, but they lack complex smart contract functionality by design.
Right.
You can't easily build automated lending protocols, liquidity pools, or complex yield farming strategies directly on the base layer of Bitcoin. The Facet system bridges that gap by tokenizing those base layer assets onto the Flare network, which has the EVM smart contract capabilities.
So you turn native XRP into a tokenized version called FXRP, which can interact with all these complex financial instruments. But how complicated is that process for a traditional finance firm to actually execute? If it requires managing a dozen different bridge transactions, a corporate team is going to balk.
Historically, bridging assets was complex and dangerous, but the Assets v1.3 upgrade streamlined the practical steps significantly. Under the new architecture, a firm simply sends their native XRP directly to a verified agent address on the native XRP ledger using standard destination tags.
That's just a standard transaction. Any corporate accounting software can do that.
Then the Flare data connector we discussed earlier monitors the XRP ledger. It verifies that the payment transaction occurred. Once consensus is reached, the system automatically mints the corresponding FXRP directly to the user's Flare address. It eliminates the need for the user to execute separate collateral reservation transactions.
That sounds simple enough, but are institutions actually doing this?
Oh, definitely. Look at what happened in June 2025. Vivo Power, a NASDAQ-listed corporate entity, converted $100 million of their corporate treasury into XRP and deployed it via Flare's Facets infrastructure.
$100 million from a publicly traded company is a massive vote of confidence. What are they doing with it once it's converted to FXRP?
They are earning yield programmatically. Using Flare Smart Accounts, which integrate seamlessly with institutional custody solutions like Fireblocks, users can deposit their assets into yield vaults. The initial Earn XRP vault hit its capacity cap of 25 million XRP within a single week of launch.
Where is the yield actually coming from? In traditional finance, yield comes from lending money to a borrower who pays interest. Where does it come from in this ecosystem?
From a variety of automated DeFi strategies. One major avenue is Firelight Phase 2, which introduced liquid staking. This allows institutions to stake their FXRP to help secure the network itself, earning a yield in the form of STXRP staked XRP.
Okay.
But because it's liquid staking, they still maintain a derivative token of the asset to use in other protocols simultaneously. Furthermore, Flare integrated with Morpho to enable customized lending markets.
What does a customized lending market mean for our CFO?
Well, in early DeFi, you had to put your money into a massive universal liquidity pool with one set of rules. With customized lending markets, institutions can define their own exact interest rates and collateral requirements.
Yeah, control.
Exactly. They can whitelist specific counterparties. They aren't forced into a one-size-fits-all risk profile. They can tailor the parameters to match their exact corporate treasury mandates.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also a bit scary. If I'm a CFO, I am responsible to my board of directors for that $100 million.
Naturally.
When I look at DeFi historically, I see smart contract hacks, depegging events where a token loses its one-to-one value, and massive volatility. I hear terms like automatic liquidation. If I hear automatic liquidation, I panic. I assume the computer is going to sell off my treasury assets during a momentary market dip. How is this system safe for corporate capital?
That is the exact right question a CFO should be asking. To understand the safety, you have to look at the risk mitigation layers built into the Facet system, specifically the core vault architecture.
Break down the core vault for us.
In traditional bridging systems, the infrastructure agents who facilitate the transfer of the asset hold the underlying collateral in their own private wallets. If that agent gets hacked, or if the agent acts maliciously and runs away with the funds, the collateral is gone.
And the minted token on the other side becomes instantly worthless.
Right. That's how almost every major bridge hack in history has happened. This central honeypot gets drained. Flare fundamentally changed the model. They use a pooled smart contract core vault.
How does that work?
The infrastructure agents manage the collateral, but no single agent owns or controls the vault assets. Agents can request assets for operational redemptions, but they cannot directly withdraw them. The smart contract acts as an immutable escrow.
It limits the blast radius. Even if an agent's keys are compromised, the hacker can't drain the main pool.
Exactly. Now, regarding your fear of automatic liquidation, you have to understand who is being liquidated. It is not the corporate minter, it is the infrastructure agent.
Wait, clarify that. The agent takes the hit.
Yes. As a corporate minter, your FXRP is backed by the underlying XRP you deposited, plus an over-collateralized layer provided by the infrastructure agents in the form of stablecoins, or FLR tokens.
Okay, I follow.
If the market experiences a violent swing and the value of that collateral drops below a predefined safe threshold, the system automatically liquidates the agent's holdings to buy back the asset.
To protect the minter.
It ensures that the FXRP held by the corporate treasury is always fully backed, even in a flash crash. The risk of market volatility is placed squarely on the infrastructure providers who are earning fees to take that risk. It is not on the corporate treasury holding the asset.
That drastically changes the risk profile for a CFO. But what if the entire underlying blockchain, say the XRP ledger itself, experiences a catastrophic exploit? What if the foundation crumbles?
There are multiple fail-safes for systemic collapse. First, the system has minting caps. Flare enforces a strict cap on the total amount of FXRP that can be minted at one time.
So you can't just mint a billion out of nowhere.
Right. This prevents a runaway inflation scenario where a hacker exploits the base chain and tries to mint infinite FXRP on Flare to drain the liquidity pools.
It acts as a circuit breaker to stop the contagion.
And as a final, absolute failsafe, there is the core vault emergency routing. In the event of a severe consensus attack, a critical smart contract vulnerability discovery, or a systemic protocol failure, the smart contracts are programmatically configured to route all remaining collateral directly to a highly regulated off-chain custodian connected to Ripple.
So if the digital building catches fire, the sprinkler system goes off, and the money is automatically wired to a highly regulated traditional bank vault offline where the hackers can't reach it.
It provides the programmatic high-speed yield of DeFi with the ultimate fallback security of traditional finance. This layered risk mitigation is why conservative corporations are increasingly comfortable treating FXRP as a Tier 1 treasury asset.
Okay, so we've secured the corporate treasury as it exists today, managed by human CFOs using digital tools to earn yield. But the documentation points to a much more radical future. It suggests that in the next decade, humans won't be manually pushing the buttons to allocate this capital. Autonomous agents will.
We are moving into the agentic era and the concept of Denarii private vaults. We are transitioning from single AI agents executing isolated tasks to what are called autonomous swarm economies.
Let's talk about Denarii. It outlines a 4-layer stack for this new economy. Let's really dig into how these layers interact. Level 1 is the settlement layer.
This is the physical bedrock. This is the XRP ledger, or Xrpl. It provides rapid finality, high throughput, and a native decentralized exchange with near zero transaction costs.
Which is necessary for scale.
Absolutely. When machines transact with other machines millions of times a day, they need to settle in seconds, not minutes, and they can't pay high gas fees. The Xrpl provides that physical ledger where ownership is anchored without human latency.
Then level 2 is the verification layer. We've talked extensively about this.
This is Flare combined with the trusted execution environments. The FTSOV2 provides the tamper-proof data feeds from the outside world. The FTC proves external states like API responses, and the TE enclaves physically validate the complex off-chain computations safely.
It's the layer that proves to the rest of the world that the machine is telling the truth.
Now we get to the new stuff. Level 3, the coordination layer, the Denarii Orchestrator.
What exactly does an orchestrator do in a machine economy?
Think of the orchestrator as the overarching operating system for the machine economy. It handles the deployment of multi-agent swarms. It manages real-time telemetry to monitor the health, the objectives, and the capital efficiency of active agents operating across diverse networks.
Okay.
It coordinates complex cross-chain state paths, ensuring that if an agent starts a task on one blockchain, it can seamlessly finish it on another.
And level 4 is the interface. The text explicitly mentions MB589 and MG589.
These are digital economic entities. They act as the bridge between human operators and these complex autonomous systems. They are designed for onboarding, cultural amplification, and gamified identity navigation. They help humans safely program the parameters before letting the AI loose in complex DeFi architectures.
So, translate this into business value for me. How does an autonomous treasury workflow actually happen within this 4-layer stack?
An autonomous agent operates as an independent entity. First, it establishes direct cryptographic control over a dedicated private vault on the Denarii network.
And remember, because of the transparency paradox we discussed in Section 1, this vault is completely private. No one can see the agent's strategy, its counterparties, or its real-time balances, but the agent can still emit mathematical proofs of its solvency to human auditors.
Precisely. Once the agent secures the vault, it needs to interact with the world. It uses advanced tokenization standards to do this efficiently. For instance, the system leverages EIP 3009 off-chain signatures.
Wait, I need a translation on EIP 3009. Why do off-chain signatures matter to a CFO?
If an agent has to submit a transaction to the main blockchain every single time it wants to pay for something, the gas fees will eat the treasury alive, and the network latency will slow the agent down. EIP 3019 allows the agent to digitally sign an authorization for a stablecoin payment off-chain. The recipient can then collect the payment later, aggregating multiple micropayments into one final settlement on the blockchain. It saves massive amounts of time and capital.
It also leverages the BY402 agentic commerce protocol.
This is a fascinating revival of the classic HTTP 402 payment required standard from the early days of the internet, but adapted for Web3. It enables agents to pay for API microservices seamlessly.
Wow.
An agent can pay per token of data, per API request, or even per second of computing power directly at the network rail.
Let me contextualize this. Imagine your company's logistics software not just ordering supplies. Imagine it negotiating the spot price of steel,
Right.
executing the cross-border payment using an off-chain signature, and proving its compliance to European regulators instantly without a single human signing off. It just pays for the weather API calls and the port API calls it needs, second by second, using the BY402 protocol.
And that is just a single agent acting alone. When you scale this architecture up via the Denarii Orchestrator, you get swarm economies.
Farm economies.
Thousands of autonomous agents, each with its own unique identity, its own reputation score, its own budget, and its own private vault, all coordinating together to achieve a macro objective set by the CFO.
Give me a tangible example of what a swarm does.
Consider physical infrastructure monitoring. Imagine a swarm of autonomous drones inspecting a localized utility grid for a power company. Each drone is an independent economic actor. It uses its private vault to pay for its own battery recharges from automated charging pads.
Oh, I see.
It purchases highly localized wind navigation data from other weather sensor agents programmatically. If a drone breaks, it uses its funds to hire a maintenance bot.
Or think about distributed data acquisition. Millions of sensors across a city buying, processing, and selling environmental data sets in real time across decentralized marketplaces.
Or pure financial dynamic resource allocation. A swarm of financial AI agents constantly optimizing liquidity and computing power across multiple blockchain networks. They analyze yield curves, move collateral, and execute arbitrage trades 247 to maximize corporate yields and minimize transaction friction.
Instead of a human finance team spending weeks analyzing reports to allocate capital for the next quarter, a sovereign AI fund raises money, invests it, dynamically rebalances the portfolio every minute, and pays out dividends to shareholders, all privately within the vault, only emitting a public proof of reserve to satisfy the regulators. It's a self-organizing economic system functioning entirely through mathematics.
But operating these swarms is incredibly complex. A CFO or a human treasury operator can't just unleash thousands of AI agents with corporate capital without extensive training. The risk of a cascading failure is too high.
Which is why the Denarii Orchestrator embeds a gamified training sandbox, the machine economy simulator. How do human operators train for a future where machines make the financial decisions?
The simulator acts as an interactive, high-stakes testing ground to stress test autonomous capital strategies in adversarial environments. Operators are put through 3 core combat mechanics that simulate real-world cryptographic challenges.
The first scenario is FDSO Oracle warfare.
In this simulation, operators must manage live price feed nodes. The system artificially injects data anomalies into the feed. If the price feed spread among the nodes deviates by more than 0.6%, it triggers a drift anomaly.
So the human operator is training to identify and mitigate Oracle manipulation attacks, like a malicious actor trying to spoof the price of an asset to force a liquidation before they deploy live capital. They have to learn how the AI agent will react to bad data.
Exactly. The second mechanic is flare state connector attacks. Operators are given $25,000 in simulated capital and challenged to act as the attacker.
Oh, switching sides.
They attempt to break state adjacency rules. They attack network nodes via cross-chain state proofs, simulating double spend attacks or bridge exploitation.
You have to know how the hackers attack to know how to program the AI defenses.
And the third mechanic is ZK roll-up shields. To defend their simulated liquidity sectors from the state attacks they just learned about, operators deploy cryptographic defenses that applied a 1.5x multiplier to their security scores. This models how zero-knowledge roll-ups protect localized state channels from external exploits. Every action in the simulator is resolved through an actual cryptographic transaction hash simulation.
It's hands-on experience with the deterministic, hash-based execution rules of Web3 networks.
Yeah.
You are learning economic control systems. This all sounds like science fiction, but the roadmap makes it clear this infrastructure is rolling out right now. How does a corporate treasury team strategically transition from their legacy Oracle databases to this new machine economy?
The transition isn't an overnight switch. Denarii outlines a very specific 5-phase strategic roadmap for treasury teams to integrate these decentralized protocols.
Let's debate the timeline. Phase 1 is establishing the private vault infrastructure.
This involves deploying the base vault smart contracts on the Layer 1, integrating the Layer 2 verification via the Flare T enclaves, and establishing consensus anchoring. The framework specifically mentions Hedera consensus service anchoring here.
Why Hedera? What does HCS bring to the table?
Hedera Consensus Service, or HCS, acts as a decentralized notary. It provides immutable timestamping and fair transaction ordering based on a unique architecture.
Right.
By anchoring the state transitions of the private vault to HCS, you create a perfect audit trail that enables real-time compliance monitoring without exposing the private transaction data itself. It's the foundational security layer.
Okay, so the secure vaults are built and audited. Phase 2 is agent treasury systems.
This is where you integrate identity-bound agent wallets. You implement standards like ERC-804 registries and ERC-6551 token-bound accounts.
Let me translate ERC-6551. It basically means an NFT or a digital identity can own its own wallet. The agent isn't just a piece of code, it becomes a sovereign entity with a bank account.
Yes. Phase 2 launches these sovereign AI agents, giving them the capability to manage persistent on-chain portfolios over long periods.
Then Phase 3 connects them to the world. Machine commerce.
This is the implementation of the EIP 3009 off-chain signatures and the MB589 micropayment protocols we discussed. Phase 3 connects the autonomous agents directly to real-world data marketplaces and API providers so they can start spending and earning capital autonomously.
Phase 4 scales it up to autonomous swarm economies.
In Phase 4, you deploy the Denarii Orchestrator's real-time telemetry to monitor and coordinate multi-agent swarm deployments. The swarms begin executing complex multi-chain capital strategies.
And finally, Phase 5, global infrastructure.
This is the ultimate vision, integrating edge hardware, manufacturing nodes, and autonomous vehicle networks directly into the private vault grid. It establishes these verifiable private vaults as the standard financial operating system for all global machine commerce.
I have to push back on the complexity of this. It is a massive, multi-year transition requiring billions in capital investment. But infrastructure requires long-term security, and long-term security requires aligned economic incentives. If the Flare network is going to be the bedrock trust layer for trillions of dollars in machine commerce, how does the network sustain itself economically over the next 20 years? We need to look at FIP.16.
Flare Improvement Proposal 16, or FIP.16, is arguably the most critical tokenomic shift for the network. It was accepted by governance with a massive 98.06% majority vote in April 2026.
The core objective being to transition the network's economics from inflationary issuance to an organic activity-driven flywheel. Prior to FIP.16, the network relied on high inflation to reward the validators and the data providers.
Right.
FIP.16 immediately reduced the annual FLR inflation rate from 5% to 3% and lowered the yearly inflation hard cap from 5 billion to 3 billion tokens.
They drastically cut the creation of new tokens. But the brilliance of FIP.16 is that they simultaneously increased the burn rate. They implemented a 20-fold increase in the minimal base gas fee, raising it from 60 gwei to 1,200 gwei.
A gwei being a fractional denomination of the base token used to measure transaction costs. Now, even with the 20-fold increase, transaction costs remain a fraction of a cent, so it's still incredibly cheap for autonomous agents executing high-frequency trades.
Exactly.
But in aggregate, based on baseline volumes, this fee structure is projected to permanently burn approximately 300 million FLR tokens annually.
If you do the math on that, gross inflation at 3% creates about 2.58 billion new FLR. But if you burn 300 million of those, you reduce the net annual inflation rate down to approximately 2.66%.
But the burning mechanism is only part of the strategy. FIP.16 also introduces the Flare Income Reinvestment Entity. It's a protocol-controlled treasury. Where does its revenue come from?
Multiple streams. First, FDC attestation fees. FIP.16 increased the base fee for a standard data connector request. While a portion goes to the data providers, 90% is routed directly to FHIR.
Right.
Second, protocol fees from minting and redemption in the Facet system, and execution fees from Flare smart accounts. And third, setup and deployment fees generated within the Flare confidential compute enclaves.
But the biggest revenue driver is protocol-captured MEV. We need to explain MEV clearly. Maximal extractable value.
On most public blockchains, MEV is essentially a hidden tax on regular users. When you submit a transaction, it sits in a public waiting room called the mempool. Third-party searcher bots analyze this pool.
Looking for big trades.
If they see you are about to make a large trade that will move the price of an asset, they will pay a higher gas fee to the network to reorder the transactions. They will execute a trade right before yours, capturing the profit for themselves and worsening your execution price.
It is high-frequency front-running, plain and simple.
What Flare did with FIP.16 is implement an enshrined block-building architecture to capture that positive MEV internally, rather than letting external predatory bots extract it from the users.
How does that roll out? There's a 3-stage roadmap for this.
In Stage 1, block building responsibilities are delegated to a designated entity, initially the Flare Foundation. They execute the arbitrage and liquidations natively and route 100% of the captured proceeds directly back to the Fire revenue pool.
Stage 2 brings in the hardware security we discussed earlier.
In Stage 2, the block building algorithm is migrated inside the secure Flare confidential Compute T enclaves. This makes the block building process fully transparent, publicly auditable, and mathematically proven to comply with the network's MEV mandate.
So the hardware enforces fairness.
It structurally prevents the builder from engaging in malicious sandwich attacks or transaction censorship.
And Stage 3.
The block builder and the block proposer are merged into a single enshrined protocol entity. Validator nodes shift from producing blocks to simply verifying their correctness.
So Fire aggregates all this revenue, the FTC fees, the asset fees, the captured MEV. What does it actually do with the money to sustain the network?
It acts primarily as a supply reduction vehicle. It executes market buybacks and burns FLR tokens, constantly reducing the circulating supply. Secondarily, it possesses a growth mandate, distributing assets to reward developers, incentivize liquidity providers, and fund the ongoing security operations of the network.
That's a strong cycle.
It creates a powerful economic flywheel. As network adoption and agentic commerce grow, the revenue grows, accelerating the supply reduction and compounding the value of the underlying ledger, securing the trust layer.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what is the ultimate takeaway for the institutions looking at this space?
The historical context is crucial here. If you look at the evolution of digital primitives, the base layer infrastructure rarely captures the majority of the market value. TCP/IP didn't capture the trillions. The web browsers, social networks, and e-commerce platforms built on top of it did. Proof-of-work consensus enabled Bitcoin, but the exchanges and financial products built around it captured immense value.
The consensus suggests private vaults are the next primitive, projecting a multi-trillion-dollar market as AI agents become self-funding participants in the global economy.
And the winner in this space won't be the base ledger alone, and it won't be the hardware vendor. The first-mover advantage will be captured by the platform that makes these complex cryptographic private vaults completely invisible to the end user.
Like using the internet. We don't think about the routing protocols or the BGP handshakes. We just click a link and the page loads.
Users, CFOs, and autonomous agents shouldn't have to manually manage hardware keys, verify quantum signatures, or adjust VRF thresholds. They need an intuitive interface where complex privacy and verifiable trust are managed entirely under the hood. The team that establishes that default financial operating system is the one that wins the machine economy.
Okay, let's recap the journey we've taken on this deep dive. We started by looking at the traditional corporate treasury, the fortress, and realized that in an era of 29-minute AI breakout speeds, public blockchains are just glass vaults that expose corporate strategy to predatory algorithms.
Right.
We explored how Flare's FTSOV2 and data connector securely bring truth on-chain, using 100 decentralized validators, commit reveal schemes, and Merkle roots, rather than centralized points of failure.
We examined how trusted execution environments and multi-T protocol-managed wallets fortify that vault. We looked at how mixing hardware from Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA locks private keys away from human hands and protects against future quantum computing threats using transient verification.
We mapped out how the facets system allows CFOs to put that capital to work, earning programmatic yield on native assets like Xrpl, while mitigating risk through core vault liquidations that protect the corporate mentor. And finally, we looked at the Denarii stack, mapping out a future where swarms of autonomous agents use off-chain signatures to manage vast treasuries inside private, verifiable digital vaults, sustained by the deflationary tokenomics of FIP.16.
It is a comprehensive blueprint for the transition from human-managed, speculative crypto to automated, highly secure machine-to-machine commerce.
Before you go, consider this. We spent this whole time looking at how corporations can build trust with autonomous machines. We've approached this entirely from the mindset of the human CFO trying to control the software. But as these swarm economies grow, as they use the BY402 protocol to trade data, as they develop their own reputations, their own credit scores, and manage their own vast pools of capital without human intervention.
It's a chilling thought.
What happens when the machines decide they no longer need to verify us? Are we building the infrastructure for a corporate upgrade to protect our treasuries? Or are we actually building the foundational bank accounts for a completely parallel, sovereign, non-human economy? The software guards are already at the gates. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.